The first thing Commander Velak noticed was the taste of blood in her mouth. The second thing was the fact that she was still alive to taste it, which, given the circumstances, seemed like a cosmic joke of the cruelest variety. She opened her eyes to a nightmare of twisted metal and sparking conduits, but emergency lighting cast everything in a hellish red glow, and the acrid smell of burned circuits filled her nostrils. Her command chair, once the proud throne of a Zephyrian dreadnought captain, now resembled something you might find in a scrapyard after a particularly violent explosion. "Status report," she croaked, her voice barely audible over the hiss of escaping atmosphere somewhere in the distance. No response. She tried again, louder this time. I said, "Status report." Silence. The kind of silence that made your skin crawl and your stomach drop into your boots. Velak struggled to her feet, ignoring the sharp pain in her left shoulder where a piece of shrapnel had decided to make itself at home. The bridge of her mighty warship, the Stellar Dominion, looked like it had been put through a blender operated by a deranged lunatic. Control panels hung at impossible angles, their screens either dark or displaying error messages in cheerful, blinking text that seemed to mock her current predicament. "The computer, ship status," she commanded, hoping against hope that something, anything, was still functioning properly. Warning, came the maddeningly calm synthetic voice. "Hull integrity compromised. Life support systems operating at 12% efficiency. Crew status, processing. I am sorry, Commander. No life signs detected beyond current location." The words hit her like a physical blow. No life signs. 2,000 of Zephyria's finest warriors, engineers, and support staff. Gone. All of them. Just gone. Velak stumbled through the wreckage of her ship, her boots crunching on debris with each step. She found Lieutenant Corvin face down at his station, a massive beam having crushed his torso. The ensign Talara lay crumpled near the communications array, her normally pristine uniform torn and bloodied. Bodies everywhere. Some whole, some not so much. "Well," she muttered to herself, her voice dripping with bitter sarcasm, "this went about as well as expected." Oh wait, no it didn't. Because we expected to be counting our profits right about now, not our dead. The memory came flooding back with crystalline clarity, as unwelcome as a tax audit. 3 days ago they had received intelligence about a human cargo vessel traveling through the Kepler void, but a single ship, minimal escort. Easy prey, or so the reports had claimed. "It will be like taking candy from a hatchling," Admiral Korex had said with that smugly superior smile all Zephyrian command officers seemed to practice in the mirror. These humans barely know which end of a plasma rifle to hold. One dreadnought should be more than sufficient for such a trivial operation. Trivial. Right. Because nothing said trivial like the complete annihilation of a ship that had taken down 3 hegemony cruisers just last month. Velak had approached the human vessel, the Terra's Promise, with all the confidence of a predator stalking wounded prey. Standard intimidation protocols. Demand surrender. Board the ship. Take whatever was valuable. Leave the humans floating in space as a warning to others. Simple. Clean. Profitable. Except the humans had other ideas. The cargo ship had weapons. Lots of weapons. Hidden weapons that didn't show up on any scanner known to Zephyrian science. The moment Velak's boarding parties had launched, the helpless freighter had opened fire with enough firepower to level a small moon. But that wasn't the worst part. Oh no. The worst part was what happened next. The humans had fought like maniacs. Not the desperate, panicked fighting of cornered prey, but the cold, calculated violence of experienced killers who knew exactly what they were doing. They had targeted life support systems, engineering sections, and command centers with surgical precision. Every shot placed for maximum damage, maximum casualties. And when Velak had finally managed to destroy the human ship, she had discovered the truth that now made her stomach churn with a mixture of rage and something uncomfortably close to fear. The cargo vessel had been carrying mining equipment. Just mining equipment. Not weapons, not military supplies, not anything remotely valuable. The humans had fought to the death, sacrificing their lives and taking 2,000 Zephyrians with them, over a ship full of rock-chewing machinery. Stupid, stubborn, suicidal apes, Velak growled, kicking a piece of debris across the deck. But even as she said it, she knew the real stupidity had been hers. She had looked at humanity's primitive technology, their small ships, their lack of advanced shielding, and she had seen weakness. What she had failed to see was the madness, the absolute, uncompromising refusal to back down that seemed to define these creatures. They didn't fight like civilized beings. They fought like rabid animals who would rather die than surrender an inch of ground. And now, standing in the graveyard of her ship and her crew, Commander Velak realized something that chilled her to the bone. She had started something that she might not be able to finish. Because if one human cargo ship could do this much damage, what could an entire species of these lunatics accomplish? The emergency beacon blinked steadily in the corner of her vision, broadcasting her location to any Zephyrian vessels in range. Soon, rescue would come. Soon, she would have to explain how the pride of the Zephyrian fleet had been reduced to scrap metal by a handful of human miners. But first, she had a promise to make. Standing among the bodies of her crew, surrounded by the ruins of her arrogance, Velak spoke the words that would soon echo across the galaxy. This is not over. The life support system was dying, and it was taking its sweet time about it. Velak crawled through the maintenance shaft, her hands already numb from the dropping temperature, wondering if this was how her illustrious career would end. Not in glorious battle against worthy foes, but suffocating in a metal tube like some kind of oversized rodent. Stellar military engineering at its finest, she muttered, wrestling with a corroded coupling that probably hadn't been serviced since the ship's commissioning. Advanced civilization, they said. Superior technology, they said. Apparently nobody mentioned that our superior technology falls apart the moment someone shoots at it. The coupling finally gave way, and a blast of stale air hit her face. She had managed to reroute power from the weapons systems to life support, which was ironic considering her weapons were currently decorating several cubic kilometers of space as very expensive confetti. She dragged herself back to the bridge, where the emergency beacon continued its cheerful blinking. At least something was working as intended. The beacon would broadcast her location and status to any Zephyrian vessel within a 50 light-year radius. All she had to do was wait, try not to freeze to death, and prepare for what was going to be the most humiliating conversation of her life. 6 hours later, the rescue ship arrived. The Nebula Striker, a patrol vessel that was probably older than Velak herself, docked with her crippled dreadnought with all the grace of a drunk grizzly bear attempting ballet. Captain Vortak of the Striker was exactly the kind of pompous buffoon that Velak had hoped wouldn't be the one to find her. He strutted onto her bridge wearing an expression that suggested he had just discovered something particularly unpleasant stuck to his boot. "Well, well," Commander Velak, Vortak said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "I must say you have done quite a number on this ship. What happened here? Run into an asteroid field at full speed?" "Humans," Velak replied flatly. The word hung in the air like a bad smell. Vortak's expression shifted from smug superiority to barely concealed amusement. "Humans?" he repeated, as if she had just claimed to have been attacked by a flock of particularly aggressive butterflies. "You mean those primitive apes from the Rim territories? The ones who still use chemical propulsion for some of their ships? Those would be the ones. And how many ships were in this human fleet that managed to accomplish this?" Velak felt her jaw clench. One. The silence that followed was so profound that she could hear the distant hum of the Striker's engines through the hull. Vortak stared at her for a long moment, then threw back his head and laughed. Actually laughed. The sound echoed through the ruined bridge like the cawing of some demented bird. "One ship," he wheezed, wiping tears from his eyes. "One human ship did this to the mighty stellar dominion. Oh, this is rich. Wait until Admiral Korex hears about this." 2 days later, Velak found herself standing at attention in Admiral Korex's office, still wearing the same blood-stained uniform from the battle. The Admiral sat behind his massive desk, reading her preliminary report with the kind of expression usually reserved for particularly disappointing restaurant meals. "Let me see if I understand this correctly, Commander," Korex said without looking up. "You attacked what you believed to be a defenseless cargo vessel, and instead found yourself outgunned, outmaneuvered, and ultimately defeated by a ship that was, according to your own sensors, carrying nothing but mining equipment." "That is correct, sir. And this cargo ship was crewed by humans." "Humans, Commander. The same species that our xenobiologists classify as barely above the primitive threshold." "Yes, sir." "Yes, sir." Korex finally looked up, his pale eyes cold as vacuum. "Do you have any idea how this makes our entire military look, Commander? We have been telling the High Council for years that humans pose no significant threat to Zephyrian interests. We have assured them that humanity's expansion into our border territories is merely an inconvenience, not a strategic concern. Sir, with respect, perhaps our assessment of human capabilities requires revision." The Admiral's laugh was like ice cracking. "Revision? Commander, what you are suggesting is that our entire intelligence apparatus, our xenobiological experts, and our military strategists have all been fundamentally wrong about a species that was barely using fire when we achieved faster-than-light travel. The evidence suggests that you made critical errors in judgment that resulted in the loss of a dreadnought and 2,000 personnel." Korex leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "What it does not suggest is that humanity represents any kind of meaningful threat to the hegemony." Vilak felt something hot and sharp twist in her gut. "Sir, I saw what these humans can do. They fought with a level of tactical sophistication and sheer viciousness that—" "Enough." Korex raised his hand. "I will not have panic spreading through the ranks because one commander had a bad day against some lucky pirates. Because that is what this was it not? Pirates. Criminals using stolen technology and desperate tactics. Admiral, these were not pirates. They were defending their cargo with— With what, Commander? With some kind of secret superweapons? With advanced technology that somehow escaped the notice of our intelligence services?" Korex stood up, his imposing frame casting a long shadow across the desk. "Or perhaps they simply got lucky, and you got complacent." The words hit harder than any physical blow. Vilak straightened her shoulders, meeting the Admiral's gaze. "What are my orders, sir?" "You will take medical leave. Undergo psychological evaluation. When our doctors determine that you have recovered from the trauma of this incident, we will discuss your next assignment." Korex sat back down, already reaching for another report. "Dismissed, Commander. And Velak?" "Yes, sir?" "Try not to let your imagination run away with you during your recovery. Humans are not monsters hiding under the bed. They are simply another minor species that occasionally needs to be reminded of their place in the galaxy." Velak saluted and turned to leave, but the Admiral's final words followed her to the door. "Oh, and Commander, perhaps next time you encounter human mining equipment, you might consider bringing more than one dreadnought." The door slid shut behind her with a soft hiss, cutting off the sound of Korex's renewed laughter. Standing in the corridor, surrounded by the bustling activity of the naval headquarters, Velak made her second promise in as many days. She would prove them wrong, all of them, even if it killed her. Medical leave, as it turned out, was the perfect cover for obsessive research. While the military doctors poked and prodded at her psyche, declaring her suffering from post-traumatic stress with paranoid ideation, Velak spent every free moment buried in the archives of the Galactic Database Network. What she found there made her blood run cold. "Let me get this straight," she muttered to herself in her cramped apartment, scrolling through yet another historical document. "These humans have been at war with each other for their entire recorded history. Not occasional conflicts, not territorial disputes, constant, unending, creative warfare." The data was staggering. Humans had developed over 300 distinct methods of killing each other before they even achieved spaceflight. They had weapons called nuclear bombs that could level entire cities, and they had actually used them on their own species. twice. And we thought they were primitive, Velak laughed bitterly, reading about something called the 100 Years' War that had apparently lasted 116 years because humans were too stubborn to quit even when the name became mathematically incorrect. The more she read, the more a disturbing pattern emerged. Humans did not fight like any other species in the galaxy. Most civilized races viewed warfare as a regrettable necessity, something to be concluded as quickly and efficiently as possible. Humans treated it like an art form. They had strategies with names like Total War and Scorched Earth. They had written entire books about the philosophy of conflict. One human named Sun Tzu had penned something called The Art of War that was still being studied by their military academies 2,500 years later. Who studies war for 25 centuries? Velak asked her empty apartment. What kind of species treats violence as an academic subject? The answer, she was beginning to realize, was the kind of species that could take down a Zephyrian dreadnought with a mining ship. 3 weeks into her research, she found the name she was looking for, Captain Marcus Webb of the freight company Terra Logistics, former Earth Alliance Navy, decorated veteran of the Proxima conflicts, currently commanding the merchant vessel Terra's Promise. Or rather, formerly commanding it, since Velak had turned his ship into an expanding cloud of superheated gas. But Webb had something that interested her far more than his military record. He had family. A wife, 2 children, all living on a colony world called New Haven in the Outer Rim. According to the passenger manifests, Webb made regular supply runs to that particular system. How touching, Velak said, studying the family photos she had managed to hack from Webb's personal files. The brave captain fighting to protect his loved ones. Well, let us see how brave he feels when the fight comes to him. But she could not do this alone. The Zephyrian military had made it clear that any action against human targets would be considered unauthorized and subject to court-martial. She needed allies. The kind of allies that did not ask inconvenient questions about official sanction. In the mercenary bars on Kepler Station were exactly as sleazy as she had expected. The patrons were a mixture of species that the galaxy would not miss if they suddenly disappeared, all nursing drinks that probably doubled as industrial solvents. Velak approached a table where 3 particularly unsavory characters were engaged in what appeared to be either a business negotiation or a philosophical debate about the relative merits of different torture techniques. I am looking for professionals, she announced without preamble. The largest of the 3, a Thrakari male with more scars than skin, looked her up and down with obvious disdain. Lady, you look like military. We do not work with military. Ex-military, Velak corrected. And I am offering payment that would allow you to retire comfortably to whatever fetid swamp you call home. That got their attention. She spent the next hour outlining her proposal, carefully omitting certain details about her previous encounter with human forces. Within a week, she had assembled a small fleet of cutthroats, pirates, and guns for hire. Not the most reliable allies, perhaps, but they had one crucial advantage: they were expendable. The intelligence gathering proved surprisingly easy. Humans, for all their martial prowess, had remarkably lax information security. Their networks were a joke, their databases poorly encrypted, their communications practically begging to be intercepted. Velak learned that New Haven was an agricultural colony with a population of roughly 50,000. It had minimal defensive installations, relying primarily on its remote location for protection. The colony imported most of its manufactured goods through a handful of freight companies, with Terra Logistics being one of the primary suppliers. Webb made a supply run to New Haven every 6 weeks like clockwork. His next scheduled arrival was in 18 days. Perfect, Velak said, reviewing the orbital mechanics of the system. Remote location, minimal defenses, predictable shipping schedule. It is almost like these humans want to be attacked. But the more she studied human colonial patterns, the more a nagging doubt began to eat at her. These people were not stupid. Their expansion into the Rim territories was methodical, well-planned, and disturbingly rapid. They established colonies in systems that other species had dismissed as worthless, then somehow made them profitable. and they all seemed to be armed. Every single human colony she researched had what they euphemistically called civilian defense forces, farmers with military-grade weapons, miners with combat training, shopkeepers who knew how to operate anti-ship missiles. What kind of civilians need anti-ship missiles? She wondered aloud, scrolling through yet another colony's equipment manifests. The answer came to her with uncomfortable clarity, the kind who expected to use them. Still, she pressed forward with her planning. Webb's route would take him through the Kepler void, the same stretch of space where this whole mess had started. There was a certain poetic justice to that. She would ambush him there, capture him alive, and then make him watch as she systematically destroyed everything he had fought to protect. Her mercenary allies were eager for action, motivated by the promise of salvage rights and the kind of payment that made moral considerations irrelevant. They had ships, they had weapons, and most importantly, they had absolutely no idea what they were about to face. Vilak allowed herself a cold smile as she finalized the attack plan. The humans had gotten lucky once. They had caught her unprepared, overconfident, and alone. This time would be different. This time she was bringing friends. As she transmitted the final coordinates to her fleet, Vilak felt a familiar thrill of anticipation. Soon, Marcus Webb would learn what happened to humans who dared to humiliate the Zephyrian military. Soon, the hunt would begin in earnest. What could possibly go wrong? The attack on the Proxima mining stations was supposed to be a warm-up exercise. 3 isolated facilities, minimal security, skeleton crews of civilian miners. Perfect targets to test her new mercenary fleet and send a message that would eventually reach Captain Webb's ears. Vilak had chosen the targets carefully, remote enough that military response would take hours, small enough that her forces would have overwhelming numerical superiority, and valuable enough that their destruction would definitely make the news feeds. Remember, she told her assembled captains over the comm channel, "We want survivors to spread word of what happened here. We kill most of them, but leave a few alive to tell the tale. Fear is a weapon, and I want Webb to be afraid." The first station, designated Proxima 7, appeared on their sensors as they dropped out of hyperspace. It's a modest facility built into an asteroid, with perhaps 30 personnel and minimal defensive armaments. 2 patrol craft, barely worth the name, orbited lazily around the mining complex. "Pathetic," muttered Captain Grimjaw, the Thrakari mercenary leading her starboard wing. "This will be over before breakfast." Vilak's fleet moved into attack formation, 12 ships against 2. The math seemed simple enough. It was about to get very complicated. The moment her ships came within weapons range, the asteroid mining station opened fire. Not with the light defensive weapons she had expected, but with military-grade particle cannons that had somehow been hidden inside the mining equipment. Where in the 7 hells did miners get particle cannons? She shouted over the comm as her lead ship took a direct hit. The answer came in the form of the station's emergency broadcast, transmitted on all frequencies in clear, unencrypted speech. "This is Proxima 7 to all human vessels in the area. We are under attack by unknown hostiles. Request immediate assistance. We are not surrendering. Repeat, we are not surrendering. Not surrendering." As if that was even an option they had considered. The 2 patrol craft, instead of fleeing as any sane beings would do when faced with overwhelming odds, accelerated directly toward Vilak's fleet. They opened fire with everything they had, their small weapons doing minimal damage but forcing her ships to maneuver defensively. "They are trying to ram us," Grimjaw reported, his voice reaching an octave that suggested his species was capable of genuine panic. "The crazy humans are trying to ram us." One of the patrol craft, its hull trailing atmosphere and debris, slammed into the mercenary vessel Blood Prophet at full speed. Both ships disappeared in a brilliant fireball that lit up the asteroid field like a second sun. The mining station continued to fire, its operators apparently unconcerned by the fact that they were outnumbered 6-1 and had exactly 0 chance of survival. They fought with the grim determination of beings who had already accepted death and were simply trying to take as many enemies with them as possible. It took Velak 40 minutes and the loss of 3 ships to finally silence Proxima 7. When her boarding parties swept through the facility, they found no survivors. The miners had fought to the last person, using mining tools as weapons when their ammunition ran out. Next time, she told her remaining captains, "We stay at maximum range and pound them into dust. No more close approaches." The second station, Proxima 12, proved even more troublesome. The miners there had apparently received the distress call from Proxima 7 and used the intervening time to prepare an elaborate surprise. They had rigged their entire facility to explode. Warning, came the calm human voice over the comm. "You have 30 seconds to withdraw to minimum safe distance before we detonate our reactor core. This is not a bluff. We repeat, this is not a bluff." Velak stared at her tactical display in disbelief. They are going to blow themselves up rather than surrender? 20 seconds, the human voice continued helpfully. "All ships, emergency withdrawal," Velak shouted, but she knew it was too late. Her ships were too close, moving too fast to escape the blast radius in time. The explosion, when it came, was visible from 3 star systems away. Proxima 12 took another 2 of her mercenary vessels with it, along with 37 miners who had apparently decided that mutual annihilation was preferable to capture. "What is wrong with these people?" demanded Captain Scarlix, the Reptani commander of her port wing. "Do they not understand the concept of survival?" Velak was beginning to suspect that humans had a very different definition of survival than the rest of the galaxy. The third station, Proxima 15, was the largest of the 3 targets, with a crew of nearly 100 and significantly better defensive systems. Velak approached it with the caution of someone who had just learned that easy targets. It was apparently not a concept that translated well into human languages. She kept her fleet at maximum weapons range and ordered continuous bombardment. No boarding actions, no attempts at capture, just relentless firepower until the station was reduced to scrap metal and regret. It should have been a slaughter. It was a slaughter. But somehow, the humans managed to make even dying seem like a tactical victory. They broadcast continuous updates to the human colonial network, describing Velak's ships in detail, analyzing her attack patterns, and providing tactical data that would undoubtedly be used against her in future encounters. They fought back with jury-rigged weapons and improvised tactics that defied every principle of civilized warfare. And when their station finally fell silent, Velak realized with growing horror that she had learned absolutely nothing useful about her real target. Captain Webb now knew she was coming, knew what ships she was using, and had access to detailed analysis of her tactical preferences. "So," she said to her remaining 8 ships, staring at the debris field that had once been 3 mining stations, "that went well." Her sarcasm was lost on the mercenaries, who were too busy counting their losses to appreciate irony. 5 ships destroyed, dozens of crew dead, and all they had accomplished was giving Marcus Webb a detailed intelligence briefing about their capabilities. "Ma-am," reported her communications officer, "we are receiving multiple hyperspace signatures, human military vessels, bearing directly for our position." Of course they were. Because apparently humans had this annoying habit of actually responding when their people called for help. "Time to intercept?" "Approximately 6 hours, Ma-am." Velak looked at her tactical display, then at her remaining ships, then at the expanding debris field where 3 easy targets had just taught her a very expensive lesson about human nature. Her revenge mission was definitely going to be more complicated than expected. 3 weeks of careful planning had gone into the perfect ambush. Velak had chosen the Kepler void specifically because it was where this whole nightmare had started. There was something poetically satisfying about ending Captain Webb's career in the same stretch of empty space where he had ended hers. The ambush site was a masterpiece of tactical positioning. Her remaining 8 ships were hidden behind a cluster of metallic asteroids that would mask their energy signatures until the last possible moment. She had mapped every possible escape route, calculated optimal firing solutions, and prepared for every contingency she could imagine. This time, she told her assembled captains, we do this properly. No heroic charges, no close-range engagements, no unnecessary risks. We wait until the target is committed to his trajectory, then we hit him from 3 directions simultaneously. Captain Grimjaw flexed his claws nervously. The Thrakari had lost his enthusiasm for hunting humans after watching his comrades get turned into cosmic debris by harmless miners. What if he runs? Grimjaw asked. These humans seem fond of suicide attacks, but this Webb character might be smarter than the miners. He will not run, Valak said with more confidence than she felt. According to the intelligence, he has never abandoned a cargo shipment. Professional pride, apparently. These humans have an almost pathological commitment to completing their contracts. She hoped that was still true, because if Webb had learned from the mining station attacks and decided to alter his route, she would be sitting here for the next 6 months waiting for a target that would never come. The long-range sensors chimed softly. Single hyperspace signature approaching on the exact vector that Terra Logistics had filed with the navigation authorities. Right on schedule, right on course, apparently walking straight into her carefully prepared trap. Contact, reported her sensor officer. Single vessel, human configuration, mass consistent with a Hercules-class freight hauler. Belak felt a surge of anticipation. After weeks of frustration and mounting casualties, finally something was going according to plan. Terra's promise dropped out of hyperspace exactly where the flight plan indicated it would. The ship looked exactly like what it was supposed to be, a blocky utilitarian cargo vessel with minimal weapons and basic shielding. The kind of ship that any reasonable military force could capture without breaking a sweat. Target acquired, Valak announced. All ships maintain position until I give the attack order. Remember, I want Captain Webb alive for questioning. The freight hauler continued on its course, apparently oblivious to the 8 predators lurking in the asteroid field. Its sensors swept the area in routine fashion, the kind of perfunctory scan that merchant captains performed more out of habit than any real expectation of finding trouble. Valak waited until the ship was committed to its approach vector, too deep in the gravity well to jump back to hyperspace without a lengthy course correction. Then she gave the order that should have ended Marcus Webb's story. All ships, attack formation. Execute. Her fleet emerged from concealment like a pack of wolves descending on a wounded deer. 8 warships against 1 cargo hauler. The odds were so overwhelming that Velek was already composing the speech she would give to Webb before she had him shot. That was when everything went wrong. The cargo hauler opened fire first. Not with the light defensive weapons that should have been its only armament, but with heavy particle cannons that erupted from concealed weapon ports along its hull. The first salvo took out Captain Scarlix's ship before he could even raise his shields. Impossible, Valak breathed, watching her tactical display as the defenseless merchant vessel revealed more firepower than some military cruisers. Then Webb's voice came over the communication channel, calm and conversational, as if he were discussing the weather instead of orchestrating a devastating counter-ambush. Commander Velak, I presume? Marcus Webb, Terra Logistics. I have to say, you folks certainly know how to make an impression. 3 mining stations? That was cold, even by our standards. How did you know I was here? Valak demanded, maneuvering her ship to avoid another devastating salvo from the disguised warship. Webb's chuckle was audible over the comm. Oh, that is easy. We have been tracking your little fleet since you left Kepler Station. Did you really think nobody would notice a dozen mercenary ships suddenly developing an interest in human shipping routes? The battle was turning into a nightmare. Webb's ship, despite being outnumbered 7-1, was holding its own through a combination of superior tactics and what appeared to be military-grade equipment disguised as civilian cargo modules. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was what happened next. Webb to all units, the human captain broadcast on a wideband frequency. Target is engaged. Commence Operation Mousetrap. 6 more ships dropped out of hyperspace around Velek's fleet. Human military vessels, sleek and deadly, taking up positions that turned her carefully planned ambush into a perfectly executed counter-trap. You see, Commander, Webb continued conversationally while his newfound allies opened fire. We learned something important from those mining stations. We learned that someone with serious resources and a personal grudge was hunting human targets. So we did what humans do best. Which is what? Velak snarled, watching another of her ships disappear in a ball of superheated plasma. We adapted. Every human vessel in this sector has been modified with concealed weapons and reinforced hulls. Every shipping route has been coordinated with military patrols. And every cargo run has become a potential trap for anyone stupid enough to attack us. Velak's remaining ships were taking devastating casualties. The humans fought with a precision and coordination that spoke of extensive military training and careful preparation. This was not the desperate resistance of surprised miners. This was a professional military operation executed with flawless timing. Grimjaw, she called over the comm, prepare for emergency jump to hyperspace. Mom, we still have 5 ships operational. We can die uselessly, or we can retreat and learn from this disaster. Choose quickly. The Thrakari muttered something that probably did not translate well, but he began programming the jump coordinates. One by one, Velak's surviving ships disengaged from the battle and prepared to flee. Leaving so soon? Webb called out as the mercenary fleet began its retreat. Well, that is probably wise. But Commander Velak? Next time you want to hunt humans, you might want to bring more ships. A lot more ships. The jump to hyperspace felt like the most humiliating moment of Velak's military career. She had started this engagement with 8 ships and overwhelming confidence. She was ending it with 4 vessels, shattered pride, and the growing realization that she had seriously underestimated her opponent. As the swirling vortex of hyperspace enveloped her battered fleet, Velak stared at the tactical readouts that told the story of her defeat. Webb had not just defended himself. He had turned her own tactics against her, using her aggression and overconfidence to lure her into a trap that cost her half her remaining forces. "Ma'am," her communications officer reported hesitantly, "we are receiving a data burst from the human fleet." "What kind of data burst?" "It appears to be tactical analysis of our attack patterns, weapon capabilities, and ship specifications, along with a personal message from Captain Webb." Velak closed her eyes and tried very hard not to scream. Play the message. Webb's voice filled the bridge, still maddeningly calm and professional. "Commander, you fight like someone who learned tactics from a textbook but never learned to think like your enemy. If you insist on continuing this vendetta, might I suggest studying human military history more carefully? Pay particular attention to our thoughts on asymmetric warfare. You will find it educational." The message ended with coordinates. Not for a military base or a trap, but for New Haven Colony. Webb's home. He was inviting her to come and try again. The cantina on Tortuga Station reeked of desperation, cheap alcohol, and the kind of moral flexibility that credits could buy. Velak sat in a corner booth, nursing a drink that tasted like liquid regret while she waited for her contact to arrive. Around her, the galaxy's finest collection of murderers, thieves, and general disappointments conducted business in hushed tones. She had burned through her personal savings, liquidated her military pension, and sold everything she owned to fund what military strategists would probably call throwing good money after bad. But Velak preferred to think of it as adequate force multiplication. "You look like someone who has had a very bad month," observed a gravelly voice. Velak looked up to see a mountain of scarred flesh and bad intentions settling into the booth across from her. Grimtusk the Destroyer was everything his reputation promised. 3 meters of cybernetically enhanced Vorthan pirate lord with more confirmed kills than some plagues. "Captain Grimtusk," she said, raising her glass in mock salute. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "Former Commander Velak," he replied, his artificial eye glowing red in the dim lighting. "I heard about your recent adventures with the humans. Entertaining stuff. Expensive, but entertaining. I have a proposition that might interest you." Grimtusk leaned back, his massive frame making the reinforced chair creak ominously. I am listening, but I should warn you my rates have gone up considerably since word got out that humans bite back harder than expected. Velak slid a data pad across the table. 50 ships. Military-grade vessels, not the collection of rust buckets I was using before. Full payment in advance, plus salvage rights to everything we capture. The pirate lord's remaining organic eye widened as he reviewed the numbers. This is a considerable sum, former commander. What exactly are you planning to do with 50 ships that requires this level of investment? I am going to burn New Haven Colony to the ground and make Marcus Webb watch. Grimtusk was quiet for a long moment, his cybernetic implants whirring softly as he processed the implications. You want to attack a human colony world with 50 ships. After what happened to your last 2 fleets. The third time is the charm, as they say. Who says that? That is the stupidest thing I have ever heard. Grimtusk leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Do you have any idea what you are proposing? Attacking a colony is an act of war. The humans will respond with everything they have. That is why we need to hit hard and fast, before they can organize a proper response. The pirate lord stared at her for several seconds, then threw back his head and laughed. The sound was like grinding metal, and it drew nervous glances from the other patrons. You are completely insane, he said finally. I love it. When do we start? 3 weeks later, Velak stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the Nemesis rising, watching her assembled fleet conduct final maneuvers in the empty space beyond Tortuga Station. 50 ships. Everything from nimble raiders to heavy assault cruisers. The largest privately assembled fleet in the sector, and all of it dedicated to her personal vendetta against one human cargo captain. "Ma'am," reported her intelligence officer, a nervous skerry named Vix who specialized in intercepting military communications. We have confirmation that New Haven is lightly defended. 2 patrol boats, a handful of civilian vessels, and maybe 3,000 colonists total. Orbital defenses? Minimal. Some asteroid-mounted sensor arrays, basic traffic control systems, and what appears to be a small orbital factory. Nothing that should pose a threat to a fleet this size. Velak nodded, studying the tactical projections of New Haven's star system. A simple agricultural world with a small orbital infrastructure, perfect for her purposes. Large enough to matter to Webb, small enough to be completely destroyed before help could arrive. What about military response times? She asked. Vix consulted his data pad nervously. The nearest human naval base is 6 days away at best possible speed. Even if they dispatched a relief force the moment we attack, we would have nearly a week to complete our objectives. And Webb's shipping schedule? Terra's promise is due to arrive at New Haven in exactly 4 days. If our intelligence is correct, he will be bringing supplies for the upcoming harvest season. Perfect. Webb would arrive to find his home colony in flames and his family dead. The poetic justice was almost overwhelming. Ma'am, Vix continued hesitantly, there is one additional complication, which is, we have intercepted communications suggesting that the human Colonial Defense Force is deploying additional assets to Rim territories. Apparently, the attacks on the mining stations have prompted some kind of security review. Velak felt a cold knot form in her stomach. What kind of additional assets? Unknown, ma'am. The communications are heavily encrypted. But there have been multiple hyperspace signatures moving toward human colonial zones over the past week. She stared at the tactical display, weighing the implications. Human military reinforcements could change everything. But if she waited, Webb might alter his schedule, or New Haven might be reinforced beyond her ability to attack it. Captain Grimtusk, she called over the comm. Yes, former commander. How quickly can your fleet be ready for departure? We can leave within the hour. Why are you having second thoughts about this glorious suicide mission? On the contrary, we are moving up the timeline. I want to be in the New Haven system within 2 days. That will push our ships hard. We will arrive with reduced fuel reserves and minimal time for reconnaissance. Acceptable risks. If there are human reinforcements en route, I want this finished before they arrive. Grimtusk's laughter crackled over the comm. You really are determined to see this through, are you not? Very well. All ships, prepare for immediate departure. We have a colony to burn and a human to break. As her fleet began the complex dance of hyperspace preparation, Vilak allowed herself a moment of anticipation. Every setback, every humiliation, every lost ship had led to this moment. Webb thought he was clever, turning her tactics against her, inviting her to attack his home. He was about to learn that some invitations should not be extended. Ma'am, Vix reported, long-range sensors are detecting additional hyperspace signatures. Multiple contacts, bearing for various human systems. How many? Difficult to determine exact numbers, ma'am. At least 12, possibly more. Vilak felt the cold knot in her stomach tighten. 12 ships could be a patrol squadron, or they could be the advance elements of a much larger force. Either way, her window of opportunity was closing rapidly. All ships, she announced fleet-wide, jumped to hyperspace in 30 minutes. We have a schedule to keep. As the swirling vortex of hyperspace enveloped her fleet, Vilak tried to ignore the growing sense that she was racing against time itself. The humans were mobilizing, Webb was waiting, and somewhere in the dark between the stars, forces were gathering that would determine whether her quest for revenge ended in triumph or disaster. But she had come too far to stop now. New Haven would burn, Marcus Webb would pay for his arrogance, and the galaxy would learn what happened to those who humiliated the Zephyrian military. Even if it took every ship, she had to make it happen. New Haven hung in space like a blue-green jewel, its orbital infrastructure glittering in the light of its young star. From her position at the edge of the system, Vilak could see the agricultural domes dotting the planet's surface, the orbital factories processing the latest harvest, and the small fleet of civilian vessels going about their daily business in blissful ignorance of the storm about to break over their heads. 50 ships against maybe a dozen civilian craft, she murmured, watching the tactical display with deep satisfaction. This is going to be therapeutic. Ma'am, reported her sensor officer, we are detecting approximately 15 vessels in orbit around New Haven. Mostly cargo haulers and agricultural processors. 2 ships that might be patrol craft, but they are running minimal power signatures. Any sign of Terra's promise? Negative, ma'am. Captain Webb is not yet in system. Even better. She would have time to secure the colony before Webb arrived. When he finally showed up, he would find his home in flames and Vilak waiting for him with a welcome that would make their previous encounters seem like friendly conversations. Captain Grimtusk, she called over the comm, begin the attack. I want those orbital installations neutralized within the hour. With pleasure, former commander. All ships, attack formation. Let us show these humans what happens when they bite off more than they can chew. Vilak's fleet moved toward New Haven like an avalanche of death and destruction. 50 warships against a handful of civilian vessels. The largest military force assembled in this sector since the Hegemony Wars, all focused on one small agricultural colony that had made the mistake of harboring Marcus Webb. The first indication that this might not go according to plan came when the civilian cargo haulers began moving into defensive positions with a precision that suggested considerable military training. Ma'am, her sensor officer reported with growing confusion, the civilian vessels are adopting combat formations. They appear to be coordinating their movements through encrypted military channels. So what? They have some ex-military personnel organizing a hopeless defense. It will make the battle slightly more interesting. The second indication came when the cargo haulers opened fire. The lead elements of Grimtusk's assault force suddenly found themselves under attack from weapons that had absolutely no business being mounted on civilian freight vessels. Heavy particle cannons erupted from concealed weapon ports. Missile launchers revealed themselves among what should have been cargo containers. Shield generators powered up with the distinctive energy signature of military-grade defensive systems. What in the name of the void? Valak stared at her tactical display as 3 of her ships took critical damage from the opening salvo. How many weapons are these people hiding? Ma-am, her intelligence officer Vix called out, his voice cracking with panic. I am reading massive power spikes from the orbital factories. They are not factories, Ma-am. They are weapons platforms. The agricultural processing stations shed their disguises like snakes shedding skin. What Valak had assumed were grain silos revealed themselves as missile batteries. The solar collection arrays unfolded into targeting dishes for long-range energy weapons. Even the orbital debris that she had dismissed as space junk turned out to be automated defense drones, powering up and converging on her fleet with obvious hostile intent. This is impossible, she breathed. Intelligence said this was a farming colony. It is a farming colony, came a familiar voice over the communication channel. We just happened to farm with military-grade equipment. Hello again, Commander Valak? Marcus Webb's voice was as calm and conversational as ever, but now it carried an undertone of cold satisfaction that made Valak's blood freeze. Where are you, Webb? She snarled. Oh, I am around. You might want to check your rear sensors. Valak spun toward her tactical display and felt her heart skip a beat. 20 additional ships had just dropped out of hyperspace behind her fleet. Human military vessels, sleek and deadly, taking up positions that turned her overwhelming numerical advantage into a very precarious tactical situation. You see, Commander. Webb continued. We have been preparing for this visit ever since you started your little campaign of terror. Every human colony in the Rim territories has been quietly reinforced. Every civilian ship has been retrofitted with military hardware. Every farming community has been trained in combat tactics. The battle was descending into chaos. Valak's ships found themselves fighting on multiple fronts against enemies that refused to behave like the helpless civilians they were supposed to be. Cargo haulers coordinated with military precision. Agricultural workers operated weapon systems with the skill of veteran gunners. Even the orbital debris seemed to be actively trying to kill her people. Grimtusk, she called over the comm, concentrate fire on the orbital platforms. We need to neutralize their heavy weapons. Trying, former commander, but these humans fight like devils. Every time we target one platform, 3 more reveal themselves. It is like fighting shadows that shoot back. Webb's tactical brilliance was becoming increasingly apparent as the battle progressed. He had turned the entire New Haven system into a death trap, using the planet's orbital infrastructure as the foundation for an elaborate defensive network. Her ships were taking devastating casualties, while the humans seemed to absorb punishment that should have crippled them. Ma-am, Vix reported, we are losing ships faster than we can count them. Current casualties are at 30% and climbing. How is that possible? We outnumber them 3-1. They are using the planet's gravity well against us, Ma-am, forcing us to fight in close quarters, where their smaller ships have maneuverability advantages. And their weapons, Vix paused, consulting his readings with obvious disbelief. Ma-am, their weapons are primitive by our standards, but they are using them in ways that our tactical computers cannot predict. A brilliant flash lit up the viewport as another of her ships disappeared under concentrated fire from what appeared to be a modified grain harvester. The human vessel, which should have been destroyed by the return fire, simply absorbed the damage and kept fighting. They are ramming us. Captain Grimtusk roared over the comm. The insane humans are actually ramming our ships with their cargo haulers. Valak watched in horror as a human freight vessel, its hull breached and trailing atmosphere, accelerated directly toward one of her heavy cruisers. The impact destroyed both ships, but the tactical advantage went to the humans, who seemed perfectly willing to trade their lives for strategic gains. This is madness, she whispered. They are fighting like they have nothing to lose. That is because they do not. Webb's voice cut through the chaos of battle. You came here to destroy our homes, Commander. To kill our families. To burn our farms and murder our children. What exactly did you expect us to do? Send you a strongly worded letter of complaint? The tide of battle was turning against her with terrifying speed. Despite her numerical superiority, despite her advanced technology, despite her careful planning, the humans were systematically dismantling her fleet through a combination of superior tactics, innovative weapon usage, and sheer bloody-minded determination. Ma-am, her communications officer, called out, "We are receiving distress calls from across the fleet. Multiple ships requesting permission to withdraw." Vilak stared at the tactical display, watching red icons disappear one by one as her carefully assembled armada was ground to pieces by farmers, miners, and cargo pilots who refused to acknowledge that they were supposed to lose. "All ships," she announced through gritted teeth, "prepare for emergency withdrawal." "Leaving so soon?" Webb asked pleasantly. "But we were just getting started." "Tell me, Commander, how does it feel to lose to a bunch of primitive humans?" The question hung in the vacuum like a curse as Velak's surviving ships began their desperate retreat from the New Haven system. She had come here with 50 ships and absolute confidence in her superiority. But she was leaving with barely 20 vessels and the bitter knowledge that Marcus Webb had just handed her the most humiliating defeat in Zephyrian military history. Again. The irony was not lost on Velak as she floated through the wreckage of Terra's promise, searching for the human who had destroyed her career, her fleet, and quite possibly her sanity. Here she was, once again picking through the debris of a battle that had gone catastrophically wrong, looking for answers that probably would not make her feel any better. Webb's ship had taken a direct hit from one of her remaining cruisers during the retreat from New Haven. The explosion had crippled the vessel, leaving it drifting among the asteroid field where this whole nightmare had started so many months ago. Where Velak had first learned that humans did not fight like civilized beings. Her boarding party had found no resistance. The ship's crew was either dead or evacuated, leaving only emergency lighting and the soft hiss of failing life support systems. But the bioscanners indicated one human life sign still aboard, somewhere in the ship's command section. Velak pushed through a twisted hatchway and found herself on what had once been Terra's Promises Bridge. The command center was a mirror image of her own destroyed dreadnought, broken displays, sparking conduits, and the kind of damage that spoke of violence applied with surgical precision. Captain Marcus Webb sat in his command chair, his left arm in an improvised sling and a field medical kit scattered around his feet. He looked up as she entered, and had the audacity to smile. "Commander Velak," he said pleasantly, as if they were meeting for coffee instead of having their final confrontation among the wreckage of 2 destroyed ships. "I was wondering when you would show up." "Please come in. Mind the debris." Velak raised her weapon, a sleek Zephyrian plasma rifle that could reduce a human to component atoms with a single shot. "This ends now, Webb." "Does it?" Webb shifted in his chair, wincing slightly from what appeared to be cracked ribs. "I mean, you have been saying that for months now, and yet here we are. You still trying to kill me still not being dead. The pattern seems fairly well established at this point. You destroyed my ship. You killed my crew. You ruined my career. I defended my cargo." Webb's voice remained maddeningly calm. "You attacked civilian miners. You murdered innocent people. You threatened my family. Seems to me we both got exactly what we were asking for." Velak felt rage building in her chest like a fusion reactor approaching critical mass. Those miners were nothing. Irrelevant insects in the grand scheme of galactic politics. "You should have surrendered. Should have surrendered." Webb repeated the words slowly as if tasting something bitter. "You know, Commander, that might be the fundamental difference between your species and mine." "What is that supposed to mean?" Webb gestured around the ruined bridge with his good arm. "Look around you. My ship is crippled. My weapons are offline. My crew is dead or evacuated. By any reasonable military assessment, I should surrender. Hand myself over to you, beg for mercy, hope that you kill me quickly instead of slowly." "Exactly. So why do you not?" "Because I am human." Webb's smile turned cold. "And humans do not surrender. Not when our families are threatened. Not when our homes are attacked. Not when some arrogant alien with delusions of superiority decides that our lives are worth less than her wounded pride." Velak tightened her grip on the weapon. Your defiance is pointless. I have won. Your ship is destroyed, your colony is burning, and you are going to die in this chair. My colony is fine, actually. Webb consulted a wrist display that somehow still functioned despite the battle damage. The casualties were remarkably light, considering you brought 50 ships to attack 3,000 farmers. Turns out farmers are pretty good at defending their land when they put their minds to it. It's impossible. I saw the orbital platforms exploding. You saw some of them exploding. We built redundancy into the system. Hidden backup weapons, automated repair systems, and enough spare parts to rebuild everything twice over. Webb chuckled, a sound that made Velak want to shoot him just to make it stop. You really do not understand humans at all, do you? I understand that you are all insane. Maybe. But our insanity serves a purpose. We fight because we have something worth fighting for. Our families, our homes, our right to exist without interference from species who think they are better than us. Webb leaned forward, his eyes growing serious. Tell me, Commander, what are you fighting for? The question caught Velak off guard. Revenge. Honor. The dignity of the Zephyrian military. Revenge for what? For losing a battle you started? Honor for what? For attacking civilians? Dignity for what? For refusing to admit that you made a mistake. Webb shook his head sadly. You have been chasing ghosts, Commander. Fighting a war that exists only in your head. I did not start this war. Yes, you did. The moment you decided that human lives were worthless. The moment you attacked that mining ship. The moment you convinced yourself that superior technology made you superior beings. Webb's voice hardened. You started a war with a species that has been fighting wars since before your people learned to make fire. And now you are surprised that we are good at it. Velak felt something crack inside her chest. Not ribs or bones, but something deeper. The foundation of beliefs that had sustained her through months of humiliation and defeat. We are the superior species, she whispered. We have faster ships, better weapons, more advanced technology. And yet, here you are, floating in the wreckage of your fleet, having lost every single engagement with the primitive humans. Webb's smile returned, but it carried no warmth. Superior technology means nothing if you do not understand your enemy. And you never understood us at all. Then explain it to me, Velak snarled. Explain why your people fight like madmen. Explain why you refuse to surrender even when defeat is certain. Webb was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made the words feel like physical blows. Because surrender means our children die, our families suffer, our homes burn. Your species sees individual battles, individual victories and defeats. We see the survival of everything we love. He met her eyes directly. Would you surrender if it meant the destruction of everything you held dear? The answer came to her with uncomfortable clarity. No, she would not. She would fight until her last breath, spend her last credit, sacrifice her last ship. Just as she had been doing for months. Just as the humans had been doing all along. Commander, her communications officer's voice crackled through her suit radio. We are detecting multiple hyperspace signatures. Large vessels, approaching fast. Velak looked at Webb, who was checking his wrist display again. His smile widened. That would be the cavalry, he said cheerfully. The third human colonial fleet, if my timing is correct. 12 heavy cruisers, 8 destroyers, and probably a carrier or 2. They have been en route since you started your little campaign. Through the viewport, Velak could see the brilliant flashes of ships dropping out of hyperspace. Human warships, larger and more advanced than anything she had encountered before. A fleet that could reduce her remaining vessels to cosmic dust without breaking a sweat. Ma'am, her communications officer continued. The fleet commander is requesting our immediate surrender. Velak stared at the tactical display showing her 4 remaining ships, surrounded by 23 human warships. The mathematics were simple. The outcome was inevitable. Her quest for revenge was over. You know what the really funny part is? Webb asked conversationally. We never wanted this fight. All we wanted was to be left alone to grow our crops, mine our asteroids, and raise our children in peace. But you just could not let that happen, could you? Valak lowered her weapon. No, we could not. Well, Commander, I hope it was worth it, because you have just taught the entire galaxy that humanity is not to be underestimated. Never again. As the human fleet moved into position around her remaining ships, Valak finally understood the true scope of her failure. She had not just lost a personal vendetta. She had started a war between species that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. And humanity had won before most people even realized the war had begun.